How's it going?
Hey, Katie, how's it going?
Nice to see you again. Not in person.
Yes, I know. It's only been a couple of weeks, hasn't it?
No, it feels like forever though.
Well, look, before we get stuck in, introduce yourself. Tell us what you do and a little bit more background, actually, of how you ended up in this role.
I am Katie Murphy. I'm VP of PR and Communications for Meow Wolf. And I probably have one of the weirdest resumes of anyone you'll ever meet. I have run the gamut from punk rock to presidential politics to art, and have also done some stuff in psychedelics and cannabis, and also, the whole gamut of weird and interesting is sort of how my career is led here. And it's mainly just about communicating and talking to people and finding audiences.
Wow. And you're now at Meow Wolf, right?
Yes.
And for people that don't know, because it still surprises me, obviously, because I've known about Meow Wolf for years. Like I said, I watched the film, totally inspired me. Couldn't wait to get to Santa Fe, took my kids, been to Vegas, I love it. But it still surprises me when I say to people, Meow Wolf, and it's still that, obviously you're rolling out massively now, but still a bit of a hidden treasure, which I still like. So explain Meow Wolf if you can. Well, if anybody can, you can.
Okay, so we've had over 10 million visitors at this point now in between 5 locations, but we are a punk rock art collective that got venture capital funding is sort of my nutshell. But it's hard to explain exactly what we are. We are an immersive art space that includes the work of hundreds of artists, might be even close to 1,000 at this point, given that we have each of our locations is between 30 and 90,000 square feet with interactive elements, stories, and different design elements that are actually all hand created by artists and made by artists. We have film, we have audio, and it's all produced for the shows. And we also have live music venues within our spaces, event spaces, and they all tell a narrative, and our lore is all interconnected. We have this multiversal world that sort of just spreads out between all of our 5 locations. We're opening in LA next year. And then after LA is New York. We just announced that at South by Southwest.
Wow. Do you know what? The reason why I love it so much is, I'm obviously from the UK, and I started going to Glastonbury Music Festival when I was 17. And one of the best experiences, and I've used this experience all the way through, or all of my event design, is I went in, because obviously it's like you can go there 5 days. And so I went into a barber shop and I got a raise, 17, that couldn't happen. But anyway, I got a buzz cut, I think. And afterwards they opened the mirror I was looking into, basically pushed me in, and, somebody offered me a shot of whiskey, and I've never seen anything like it. And I think that's why I love Meow Wolf, because in Santa Fe, you walk into a warehouse, but suddenly you go down a corridor and there's a full house in front of you. And you can walk around that house, but then you can crawl through the fireplace, and then you end up in this totally different space. In Vegas, it's a whole shopping set. It's like going to a supermarket, and then there's a fridge that opens, and you go into this whole new world. And then there are little peepholes, and you look in, and there's like tiny micro. It's just off the charts. And anybody that hasn't, you've got to go check it out, because, my wife and kids went with me, and it literally is something for everyone. I say it's interesting. Somebody just promoted Disney as a great brand. I think Meow Wolf's just literally changed the face of what Disney probably was a long time ago, but actually that's my own personal opinion. But let's broaden it out, because it's a cultural moment. It really is a cultural thing. And actually, this is where your experience comes in really well, from punk rock to politics. Boy, let's talk about like what actually makes something culturally relevant? Because so many people want to do it. And you actually said so many people have tried to copy what you do and just can't. Why? I'm not saying give us your magic formulas, but what makes it so different?
Well, that's the thing that is really sort of the interesting part of it. We had our panel at South by Southwest this year that was on like the data for data, the power of absurdity. And we also had Dan Murphy from Liquid Death on stage with us. And I think one of the things about Meow Wolf and Liquid Death or other brands, like you could look at Patagonia in the same way, or certain brands who have really established themselves as being authentic in a way that others have not necessarily like accomplished. And it's about that authenticity and being able to use your voice in a way that demonstrates what sets your brand apart. I think about things like Brat Summer, right? Like that was everything. Like, you know, these moments that happen, some of them can be constructed or have been constructed. Obviously, Brat Summer involved a marketing team that put it together and such, with Atlantic Records, but it's, you know, it's something that you can't put your finger on. And when you start looking for it, you lose the thread because it's sort of just the difference between innately knowing and understanding what you're putting out into the world and knowing that some of it will stick and some of it won't. And some of it is going to just be, you know, like not everything that Meow Wolf does, not everything that Liquid Death does, not everything that Patagonia does lands with audiences in ways that make it a cultural moment. But when you have the right team, when you have the right people sort of navigating those moments or navigating what you're putting out into the world, enough of them stick that it ends up like, you know, creating momentum for what the brand does.
That's really interesting because, you know, and very relative, especially in my world, of marketing, because it's really interesting. You've put yourself on stage and next to kind of Liquid Death, because there's a lot of debate about whether a brand can actually be culturally relevant. And, you know, the critics out there say that brands run the risk of, you know, a brand can't be culturally relevant. What's your view on that then?
Well, I think that it's how you present your brand. Like, for example, if you look at Liquid Death is a character that is selling water. It is not like the brand of Liquid Death is not just a brand. They've associated this identity with everything that they do. They don't go out of character. You will never see someone from Liquid Death, like, you know,
in a suit.
I mean, actually, like Dan Murphy, very, very clean cut guy. He was the most clean cut guy on stage and made me look like the most normal person in the room when he started talking, because it was like, I mean, the things that he came up with, like the things that he thinks about are so extraordinary. And it's the same with Meow Wolf, where we have our identity above all else, and the identity sort of drives what we do. And so I think that when we're talking about it with, you know, as a brand, it's not necessarily like you can't do it with a brand. It's like, but what is your brand? If, you know, they're selling water in a can, and people are willing to pay for water in a can because of the brand, because of what they're doing. They have a really good reason for what they're doing. And it's about, like, you know, death to plastic, right? Like, and they've been able to share what they do in a really like cool way. And I'm here to talk about, but I'm using them as an example because I think that they are really good at understanding who they are, understanding what their audience expects from them, and being what they promise to be, and while also having very strong brand values and brand mission, and packaging it in a way that is really fun for the people who consume their products. And that's kind of what we want to do too.
Yeah. And so with Miarov, they're venues, it's a space, but it does, like I just described my own experience, feel wildly immersive. And, I always talk a lot about the difference between an event and an experience, because I think they're two very different things. There are plenty of people capable of building a stage and putting chairs in front of it and a sound system and a light. But I've seen people fall asleep in environments like that. And they were bed companies doing those experiences. So what's your kind of creative philosophy? What does deliver that immersiveness? How can I actually take myself, my wife and my two kids, who are actually all individuals and very different, and we still come out buzzing about being at the same place?
Well, I think that's one of the things about Meow Wolf that really sets us apart, is that we understand that the people coming in are going to all have different perspectives, but we need to do something for each of them and take into account all of the different ways that people might engage. We have a theory of and we talked about this, like the wade, swim or dive, and people are going to want to come in and just sort of like surface level absorb what we have and check it out and sort of look through, look at the art, be impressed by the art, be impressed by the lighting and the sound design and the way they all come together in a way that doesn't happen anywhere else. And then there's the people who want to get into the story and understand it. And then there's the people who get obsessed and they live on our Discord and they follow everything and they do FOIA requests on our building plans and post them so that they all know and try to decipher what the theme is based on looking at our building plans. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has to do all of those things, but you can go into them and you can find something. And one of the things you mentioned, going with your kids, for example, like your family, and our artists are thinking about who they're creating these experiences for. We have, local artists. We have artists who are on staff at Meow Wolf. We have people that we hire just to do one room, but it's always people who are coordinating to tell the story together. And one of the things that I found really cool when I was touring Radio Tave, our location in Houston that opened on Halloween, was working with some of the artists, and they would show me how they would add an interactive element at 2 feet high so that a 2 or 3-year-old would find it and just be completely transfixed that something was made for them. And then they could show their parents and bring them down. Or we'd put something up on the ceiling. In one of our locations, there is a code that activates something, with hands, and the hands are spelling out the code to activate an ATM machine in ASL, American Sign Language, so that you would have to be with someone who understands and can read, can communicate with ASL to activate this space within Meow Wolf. And so we're thinking about different ways of accessibility, different ways that audiences can connect, different ways that people can find their way through the space. Audiences are selective. They don't want to go to the Willy Wonka immersive experience. They want to go to Meow Wolf. And we have to continue to differentiate ourselves so that what we are making, people understand the difference between a Meow Wolf, where hundreds of artists have spent years putting together these experiences with really thoughtfully crafted moments that have been created for people, than someone who threw something together based on a picture that they saw somewhere or an idea. And I mean, not to disparage anyone else that's doing art and making really cool stuff. There's some people doing really awesome stuff like Arctic House and The Sphere and, Super Blue. But it is, it's a different world, and it's not just let's pop up and make a lot of money. We have to earn our audiences. We can't just assume that they're there.
That's a really good bit of advice. Turn your audiences. Don't just assume. I think that, nobody realizes there's those great quotes like, it took me 10 years to become successful overnight. And, like I said, is, anybody that wants to be inspired about building really immersive, culturally relevant experiences should watch the film, because it shows where it all started and how it began. You talk a lot about artists. Now, I've worked with artists, but I certainly haven't worked with as many artists as you do in one go. How does that work? How do you balance creative freedom with your own brand goals and also commercial realities? It's got to be a tough little formula.
Oh my goodness. It is a tough formula. And it's also a lot of our artists who are at Meow Wolf are people who have been there since the pea smelling warehouse days. These are people who understand where we came from, understand who we are as a brand, what made us what we are, and also have a lot of opinions over how we present ourselves to the world. And it's important to have those views internally, because these are the people making what we're doing. At the same time, we are creating art for an audience. Andy Warhol was creating art for an audience. It is not everyone who is making art either to experience or to sell is not. We make it for ourselves, but we also make it for the people who are going to buy it. And ultimately we are a business, and our goals are to sell tickets, have people through the doors. And our artists have a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility in creating the things that they do. That we're not going back to Disney. We're not Disney. We are not this is our IP. This is what it looks like. This is what you use to make it. It has to look perfect. It has to look seamless. You can see our brush strokes. You can see that that little monster in the corner was made with a row of pom-poms that they that they got at Savers, and that big pile of stuff was is actually recycled toys from thrift stores and dumpsters. And it is very much a place that is driven by artists and creativity, and the idea that we can have some scaffolding around what we're doing. This is where we're going. This is the story that we're telling. But then also take proposals from artists on what they want to do, understand how it's going to fit together in the spaces that we have, how it fits together with the story, the way that as you move from room to room, how it contributes to what we're hoping that the audience experiences and what we want to convey in the ways that we allow people to fully immerse themselves in it. And there is a tension, and we sort of try and, walk that very thin line to make sure that we can make everyone as happy as possible.
Wow. Amazing. It's an absolute science, basically. It's, you guys make it look so easy. And I think that's quite a nice, I've got one more question, then we'll go into quick fire round. So we're running out of time, but there's a really interesting kind of direction there for brands, I think, or anybody trying to create something. Because do you feel that can you see a shift in how people engage with events and art and stuff like that? Because that, like you said, is we're not Disney. What I got from that is it's a lot more human. It's a lot more real. Do you feel that's actually a shift now that people enjoy seeing that and want it?
I think so. I mean, I think that there's always going to be a place for Disney. Disney is, unparalleled with what it is. But
yeah,
I think that with social media, with the way that people feel as though that parasocial relationship that folks have with brands, where it feels very personal to them, it creates a space where when you show humanity, when you show the human elements of what you do, it actually creates more resonance with the people that you're talking to. Some of our like best performing social posts recently have been behind the scenes moments with people who work in the exhibitions.
So quick fire round. What cultural reference or influence, book, artist or movie?
Lately, I've really been sort of leaning into the idea of Dadaism, with just this idea that absurdity as an answer to like the inexplicably bad things in the world. Like you can be a weirdo and it helps you like navigate the space that is weirder than anything anyone could even imagine.
What brand do you most admire right now?
I mean, I am big in on my Liquid Death kick right now. Obviously, I love what they do. I love how they do it. I think they're brilliant. Yeah. Like one of the things at Meow Wolf, that we have done in the past is sort of round up the most ridiculous bad reviews that we get, where people are, like, I think it's demonic, or I think that it, just things like that. And which it's not, it's an expression of a lot of different ways of art, but, they just released yesterday a Greatest Hates live music performance by a country artist singing their
Health. What's a game changer, and how are you? Because, like you said, there's a science in what you're doing, so that's got to have its toll. How do you look after yourself mentally and physically?
Well, I mean, okay, so I make weird hats. Hold on, I'll show you one. I have one right in front of me. I'm going to lean over and grab it.
Oh, do, because you wore one to the event as well.
Yeah. Here's one I didn't bring because it was not going to fit well into my suitcase, but it is,
oh my God, that's so cool.
It's a Hot Wheels track with, into a fascinator.
Oh my God. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Keep it on till we finish, please. And then connection. Well, God, you probably can't ask this because you've worked with hundreds, but the most meaningful collaboration you've had in your career. I feel bad even asking that now.
I think about how when I was at the Art Institute of Chicago, I was really lucky to work with artists at all ranges of their career, and I'm going to use two because I'm going to break it down. I have amazing collaborations with everyone I work with. It's really hard to describe, but there were two artists that I worked with at the Art Institute that really sort of impacted how I think about talking about people who make things. And one was Barbara Kruger, who, as you know, is one of the most prolific and amazing, feminist artist. She's an artist. She's also a feminist. Her work speaks volumes. Supreme ripped her off explicitly. And it's really funny because she was interviewed when Supreme was suing people for stealing their shtick. She was interviewed about them stealing her shtick. So I think that it's, she's just brilliant and amazing. And the way that she presents herself as a human and puts her art first is really extraordinary. And then, I also had the privilege of, working with Bisa Butler, who had an exhibition at the Art Institute that coincided with both COVID and the George Floyd, and protests and everything around that. And I got to see her in her first major museum show, and to watch her explode, and we became friends, and I still talk to her, and I think about how bringing that exhibition to audiences really influenced the way that I think about audience. It influenced the way that I talk about artists. It influenced the way that I talk about makers and how people, and bringing identity into art and the way that people think about the world.
Amazing. Katie, thank you so much for sparing time. An absolute inspiration. And you've also put some faith back into the cynicism I think I've developed as a marketeer over the years. So, I really, really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I love talking to you, Mike. Have a good one.
Oh, that's very kind of you. And I want a hat one day. I like hats because obviously.
You got it.
Brilliant. See you soon. Thank you so much.
Bye.